Welcome to Just WannaQuilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. This is Elizabeth Townsend-Gard, your host. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School and an LePage Faculty Fellow at the A.B. Friedman School of Business at Tulane, and I just want to quilt. So today we're talking with Brenda Gael Smith. She is an artist. She is way into contests and some really cool stuff with eyes, contests about eyes and seeing. Listen to her and you may be quilting a new project.
Okay, my name's Brenda Gael Smith. I use my full name professionally because, believe it or not, there's some other Brenda Smiths in the world.
Just a few.
But I go by Brenda, and I'm calling from the other Copacabana, which is in Australia, and it's about 60 miles north of Sydney.
And it is very we're not going to use the video, but it is really blustery on your side.
Yes, very windy, and of course our seasons are reversed, so we're coming into spring.
Ah, nice. Okay, so tell me your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life.
I grew up as the eldest of 6 children, and my mother sewed all our clothes.
Wow.
So I didn't spend much time at the sewing machine as a child, but I spent a lot of time in the sewing room and in haberdashery stores.
I love it. Now, when your mom sews your clothes, and there's 6 of you, how much choice do you have on what she sews?
Quite a bit of choice, and I got to spend a lot of time stroking fabrics and looking in pattern books and working out what options were available from the cloth that was available.
Right.
And recycling and chopping up things, and yes, so lots of sewing and craft.
I like that. And when did you start taking up sewing and crafts?
One of my at university, I roomed with a friend that had a sewing machine, so I sewed a lot of clothes at university. And then one of my first purchases after I started work as a lawyer was to buy a sewing machine.
And what kind of law do you still practice law?
No, I stopped about 15 years ago, but I specialized in energy and infrastructure and government regulation. So
interesting.
Electricity, trains, water,
right,
telecommunications.
Interesting. And so how did quilting, so your work is beautiful. I've already told you that. How did you get into quilting, and how did you develop the style that you have? You use a lot of color. There's some simplicity to it. There's beautiful lines in it. Sort of tell me what your process was, and tell me a little bit about your journey.
I started quilting because I wanted to make a gift for friends that were producing little people, and so I made lots and lots of baby quilts, and that was an excellent way of trying out different techniques and styles, and right from the very beginning I created my own designs, but those I made hundreds of them.
Really?
Baby quilts.
Really?
Yes.
Who did you give them to? That's craziness. Like, did you just get what was it, the size of it? Was it the ability to finish them? Like, is that like, what was it about the baby quilt that like really inspired you?
Well, first of all, they don't care whether the points match or
yeah.
the quilting is loopy or
right.
whatever. But yes, it definitely the size. I encourage everyone to start small. Yeah. And you get a certain creative momentum is generated when you complete a project and the satisfaction of delivering it and then moving on to the next one.
Yeah.
And so even now in my own creative practice, when I'm not making utilitarian quilts, I like to design small, work out construction and design issues on that small version, and then go big, because I know I've got the confidence. I know how all the pieces go together.
So can you walk us through that? Because you've done a lot of 12 by 12 quilts and like a lot of small kind of spaces. Do you feel like that's what you do, is you do it on kind of a small scale? And then how big does it get when you make it? Do you take that same thing and sort of multiply by 10? Or I don't know, like make it bigger?
I certainly have done that for a year in 2017, 2018. I made a 6 by 6 inch abstract design each week, inspired by my surroundings. And so
I like that.
I picked 2 of those little small pieces, and a large number of those then I used as a basis of much larger designs.
And did you it's so funny. I was staying with, I don't know if you know her, Cheryl Sloboda, and she did a bunch of these like small pieces that she did weekly for like years. She has these, and then she's got like a huge suitcase full of them, which she brought out, and it was so amazing. Did you quilt them? Did you bind them? Did you do like zigzag on the end of them? Like, what did you do with these? I
used a facing technique, and yes, part of my project was that they needed to be quilted and finished each week. And unlike Cheryl, I set my boundaries just for a year. And the culmination of that project was a solo exhibition. And so I actually presented those small pieces in shadow box frames as an installation in my solo exhibition.
Wow.
And it was a highly engaging exhibition, and I'm pleased to say that I sold 51 out of 52 pieces, so I don't have 52 shadow box frames in my wardrobe.
Interesting.
They're out there in the world.
Right.
But, there's something very satisfying about that kind of project where you create a body of work, and that constant practice, you can try out ideas, and it definitely flows through to the work that I'm doing now. So
when you do that, how much time did it take to make each of those, and like how much, like did it vary, and did you do this? Were you challenging yourself to think of something totally different each week, or sort of tell me a little bit more about your process on that?
Okay, I think there's one thing that as makers we intrinsically understand, and that is making takes time.
It does.
And we often, I say that each of those pieces, although they were only 6 by 6 inches, they took me at least 5 hours each. And that's not including thinking time,
right.
Designing time.
So
that's just physically cutting. And 6 by 6, I'm a piecer. I don't applique. I take those pieces and I put them together with seams. And so
interesting.
6 by 6 inch is actually
right.
quite fiddly for piecing.
Yeah, that's really tiny pieces.
And so, interestingly, the next year I went on to do 50 by 50 centimeters. That's 20 by 20 inches. And because you increase the scale, they were actually in some ways easier and quicker to construct than the little tiny ones. But they did overall take longer because of the quilting time in them. So yeah,
how much do you map out? So I'm looking at your work. It's just, I'm looking at taking shape on the website. And how much, when you're thinking about these, you've got one that's a hexagon, you've got all these really cool ones. Anyway, so how much are you mapping that out? How much are you playing with the fabric and going, oh, wait, I'm making hexagons now? Or how much are you sketching it out before you start to sew?
Okay, for that series that you're looking at, taking shape, I made the 20 by 20 inch pieces, one a month for a year, and the focus was on shape. And in my other work, I'm much more line oriented. So it was a deliberate challenge to myself to play more with shape. And as a result, it was actually much more premeditated. My process is that as much as possible, every day I go for a walk and I observe my surroundings. So for that year, when I was walking, I was really attuned to looking for shapes in the landscape. And so, and then thinking about the designs. And so, for example, that hexagon one that you're looking at, that was, I did end up generating a kind of pattern to make all those pieces go together, which is why I'm usually much more free-flowing and working on the design wall. But when you're working small like that with shapes, it's kind of important that they go together correctly. And so I found that having a rough pattern was actually more satisfying than freewheeling it and then having pieces just, a couple of inches off center would have just spoiled the design. So, so there was some tension there between being kind of freeform and but getting the results that were pleasing to the eye. And so for that series, I was a lot more constrained and pre-planning. But in my wider practice, I design on the design wall, and if the piece wants to go bigger, I let it go bigger. Or if it wants to go smaller, or I like to say I embrace the serendipity factor. So those little things when something falls down and then falls a different way. Or
you're like, brilliant.
Let's run with that.
Exactly. That's exactly what I meant to do.
and I think that's part of being creative, is being open to those factors as well. But overall, I try to. I working improvisationally doesn't mean you don't have a plan. You just you have design parameters. So for that series, my parameters were a certain size, focus on shape, and because I knew I wanted them all to go together as an exhibit, I had a controlled palette. So colors that I was.
So those aren't. So if you want to be looking at her website while we look at it too, it's Brenda Gael Smith.com. So you can go and play as we are listening. As you're listening, so you use solids. Are they solids? What kind of fabric are you using? Tell us a little bit more about, because you use what appears online to be solids, but I'm not totally sure they're solids.
They're my own hand-dyed fabrics.
Amazing.
And they are pretty solid, but they also have that hand-dye variation within them. And I like to use cotton Pimatex because it's very tight weave. And when I'm cutting all those wild angles and shapes, it means that the fabric keeps its shape. It doesn't stretch and distort as I'm doing the piecing in it, and it also doesn't fray, so I don't end up with lots of fluff.
So what is your studio? I'm just so curious. What does your studio look like? Is it all material either that is in the process of being dyed, and do you have like? I think your studio looks different than my studio. Is that true? Like, is it all your own hand dyed stuff?
I have a cupboard where I have bins of fabric, and I tend to stack them together in colorways and values. So dark fabrics together and light together. But I also have, not in my studio, but I have another storage area where I have large bins of fabric, of commercial fabrics that I retired from law 15 years ago, but I in a kind of frenzy before I stepped down. I went buying fabric because I thought I'm not going to have
right. You're not going to have, you're retiring, right? I like that,
so
right.
As a result, I have lots and lots of commercial fabrics, and I use them as the backing of my work.
Really?
I like to have some relationship between the front and back of my work. So, so I'm drawn to strong saturated colors and high chroma colors, and so that's my little nod to more traditional patchwork, is to try and use up those stores.
All those things that you did. I like that. I really like that a lot. Now, we're not supposed to be talking about any of this, but I got us off course. We were going to talk about exhibitions and sort of the role of that. Now, you are very much, I would say you're an art, I'm just going to go out on a limb. I would imagine you would decide you're a professional art quilter. I would imagine that's where you place yourself. Is that right?
That is where I place myself, but I'm also a life member of Quilt New South Wales, and I'm very involved in their exhibition program. And Quilt New South Wales is a state guild, and it embraces quilters across the spectrum. And cool. I'm a firm believer that guilds have a valuable role in providing a place for all makers to share their work, no matter what kind of quilts they make.
I think that's great.
So the Sydney Quilt Show next year is going to be from the 17th to the 21st of June. It's the biggest quilt show in Australasia, and if anybody's planning to travel from North America down under during your summer, the end of June is a good time to stop by Sydney and stop by the Sydney Quilt Show.
Interesting. So tell me more about what role you play in that event. Tell me about sort of why that matters to you and what you do.
Because that's where I was first introduced to like-minded people, and my role, I was exhibition secretary for some years, and then I stepped down from an official role to a supporting role, and I've also been very involved in technology and the organisation, so online entry forms, website galleries, that kind of thing. So I help to promote the show. But just going back to your question about art quilting, I also am involved in another organisation called AusQuilt Network, and they have a biennial exhibition called Art Quilt Australia, and that actually opens next week in Geelong in Victoria, and that is a major exhibition that will be on in Victoria for almost 6 months. There's 3 months at the National Wool Museum, and another 2 or 3 months at the Yarra Ranges Regional Museum. So for those of you that aren't in Australia, by the time this podcast goes to air, you will be able to jump online onto AusQuilt, OzQuilt.
All right, let's do it again. Tell me again. Tell me again. AUS quilt.
No, OZ.
OZ.
Quilt. Network.
I see it.
.org.au.
I see it.
And so there will be an online gallery of the 32 works that are on exhibition. So check that out.
Very cool.
And just to kind of jump back to talking about my weekly and monthly art projects, the one of the sizes that I worked with for a year in that Taking Shape series is, I use metric, I say 50 by 50 centimeters, but they're 20 by 20 inches.
Right.
And that is actually the size that I'm using for an exhibition that I'm curating for 2020. So the exhibition is called Vision 2020 Textiles. And I'm looking for artists anywhere in the world to enter their work. And the theme is vision. And the size is 20 by 20 inches. And it will be a touring exhibition in 2020 into 2021. And it will be on display for the first time at the Australasian Quilt Convention, which is a big quilt show and learning opportunity that's an annual event in April.
I love it. So tell me, okay, so if I'm somebody listening and I'm like, whoa, that sounds like so much fun, and I'm very stressed about trying to figure out how to go about doing this, can you talk us through like that first time person that's never entered a contest and never done anything like this, but it's like, I want to try, but I'm not sure how to do it?
Well, I'd say that this is an excellent opportunity because it's a relatively small size. So it's not a huge investment. Yeah. And so nothing mentioned, nothing gained. And so think about the theme. When I as a curator am looking to put together an exhibition, I'm really interested in getting as many different angles on the theme as people come up with. So I'm looking for a really good cross-section of interpretations of the theme. Mm-hmm. And equally, even if something obvious, I'm expecting I'm going to get a few eyes.
Right.
And
right. There's going to be a lot of eyes going on.
And so think about that. I'm interested in just different ways of looking at things, right, and different techniques and different styles. So look, if you're just coming to this new, look at the deadline and think about how much time it's going to take to make that kind of size, and don't leave it to the last minute.
Yeah.
Get it, just work away at it. And the other part of the process is that you submit your entry online, so to photograph the work to send it in.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've found that a lot of people do is they let their work down by submitting less than optimum photos, that they cut the edges off, or they have it crooked or on an angle.
Yeah.
That it's not well lit, and so you can really enhance your prospects of being selected by presenting your work in its best possible light. So take the time to photograph it well. Once again, it's a small size, so it should be pretty easy to get that up on the wall and photographed straight. But that's something that you can never spend too much time practicing, is taking good photographs and getting comfortable with your particular camera or phone or photo editing system. So I really encourage people to invest in that part of the process to support their creative work. The other thing I'd say to that new entrant is that if 50 by 50 centimeters seem too wanting, then I actually have another exhibition that I'm curating, and that's called Wonder of Eyes. And the size of these works, rather than being 20 by 20 inches, is 20 by 20 centimeters. And that's only 8 by 8.
That's very small.
That's small. So,
right.
So, and the thing about the Wonder of Eyes exhibition is that it's not a juried exhibition, that provided you make something that's the right size and that addresses the theme, Wonder of Eyes, or Eyes of Wonder, then it will be exhibited. And the other fun part of that exhibition is that it's an art exchange. So when you submit your work, you can say, yes, I'd like to be part of the exchange, which basically means everybody's name goes into the hat. And then when I return the work, I'll return you somebody else's work that has elected to be part of the exchange. So it's not compulsory. If you just want to put your work in and get your work back, that's fine. But equally, if you'd like to be part of an international exchange, you can say, yes, I'd like to do a swap, and I'd love to see just what comes back. So you might get some work from an Australian or from New Zealand.
So how many people do you expect will enter the Wonder of Eyes exchange?
I have no idea, but there's allocated space to take hundreds if need be, and I really would like to see a lot of participation, because it's a fundraising endeavour, and there's no entry fee, but every entrant I ask to make a donation to the Fred Hollows Foundation, and the Fred Hollows Foundation is instrumental in going out and doing cataract surgeries and other restorative exercises with people throughout the world, because there is the statistics are quite astonishing about how many blind people there are out there that it's either preventable or treatable.
Wow.
And it's something that is actually close to me, because I have a wide range of eye conditions, from short-sightedness to cataracts to glaucoma, and fortunately I'm able to manage these conditions, and which I find are so important to me as a
artist,
visual
right.
creative.
Right.
And so I thought, and apart from all of that, eyes are just amazing things.
Yeah.
They're just extraordinary. And so I thought to have these two exhibitions. They've got slightly different.
Right. They're both vision
techniques.
ones.
But they're both vision. And so whether you want to do something that's 20 by 20 centimeters or something that is 20 by 20 inches or both, right. 2020 is the year for it. So, so yes, I've sent you the links for those two.
Fabulous. I really love
exhibition.
It. Oh, well, I think it's just so insanely great. So, so what do you think the benefit of submitting your work? Like, do you remember the first time you submitted your work, and sort of any thoughts about why take the time to do it? Tell me more about your philosophy of being part of exhibits and submitting the work.
Well, I think, speaking personally, with the impulse, to create comes the desire to share. That you make something, you want to show somebody, and the thing about exhibiting your work is that you get to share with a wider audience, and you also get to be part of to see how your work interacts with other people's work, and that's part of the fun for me of curating exhibition, is getting all these different submissions and working out a way that they all fit together to make a cohesive exhibition. And people have just amazing interpretations, and
like putting out that call. Putting out the call. I see. Yeah, you get all these different visions of what vision is, right?
Exactly. This is my fourth touring exhibition that I've curated, and every single time I've been blown away. I try to have quite generous, overarching themes that allow for a wide range of interpretations. But every single time I go, wow, I never thought of that. And
I love it.
It's really exciting. So so for the benefit for the people that are participating, they get to share their work. The Vision exhibition will go on tour, and I'm hoping that it will tour internationally, not just in Australia. We'll see how that goes. And for the people that are entering into the Wonder of Eyes exhibition, they've got the exhibition, they've got the art exchange, and just being part of a big community that we all belong to.
Totally cool. I totally love it. I think it's really interesting and amazing. I think it's really cool. I hope people enter. I hope that we help you get people to enter it. It would be so cool. I'll try. I've never done that before. I'm like, maybe I could do something. I could do something small. I could like that, maybe, So I just think this is really cool. I like the way, I just love your work, and the stuff you're doing is really awesome and really interesting. Now, tell me a little bit about copyright. Like, what role does copyright play in the stuff? Like, if you get something that's like, are you concerned about copyright when things come in? Are you sort of, how do you deal with that? I haven't looked at the form, so I'm curious, like, what happens with that part of it? Copyright, because you do have copyright, it like links about copyright on your website, so that makes me really curious about your relationship to copyright.
I am concerned about copyright. As a curator, I'm putting my exhibition, making proposals to different event organizers, and it would be a complete bummer if I include a work that is infringing of copyright that could get into difficulties when the work goes on tour. That when I put together an exhibition, I want it to be a coherent whole, and if a work has to be withdrawn for any reason, then that compromises the overall exhibition. So in my conditions of entry, I actually require work to be entirely the design of the entrant.
So you wouldn't take something with like fan art or something like that because you'd be afraid of the underlying copyright, right?
Exactly. The other thing is that even if work is a copy of somebody else's photograph, for example, and consent's been granted, it's just a obstacle to promotion if I every time have to put a little rider on it saying with the consent of the photographer.
That's really interesting. So it just makes it, I mean, if original work just makes it easier. If you're going to curate a bunch of these things, you just don't want to be worrying about individual. Now, have you had to pull stuff because you found out that it didn't?
I haven't, but the very first exhibition that I curated was a learning experience precisely because of copyright. There were 3 different works that were submitted that incorporated copyright material. One had lyrics of a well-known Australian song, and they were very prominent. They weren't hidden in the work. That was the whole purpose of the design. And so the artist had to obtain copyright for those lyrics. Another one had,
because you wouldn't let them use fair use or fair dealings, or like you didn't make you feel comfortable with, or they didn't know.
We do not have a fair use in the same sense that the United States have a fair use exception.
And I suspect if you're going to do an exhibit that's going to go around the world, that's going to make it really complicated. Because every time it goes to a different jurisdiction, you may have different rules of it, and it's just easier to have original work. Is that right?
That's it. Yeah. Another work was incorporated extracts of a famous Australian poem by Dorothy McCullough, I Love a Sunburnt Country. And so same logic, that Dorothy McCullough died within relatively recently, and the estate is concerned to uphold the copyright. So the artist had to go through hoops to get copyright consent for that. She didn't apply. Well, she applied for it before she submitted her entry, but she didn't have the consent at the time that I was doing the selection. So we were sort of waiting for it to come through, which was a bit nerve-wracking. So that was once again a learning experience for me and a learning experience for the artist.
Totally.
And the third work incorporated a section that was based on a photograph that was in a newspaper, and the artist had to obtain consent. And so in all those instances, consent was obtained, but to make sure that the attribution was given,
more work.
Just made it logistically challenging. And so after that experience, I
you're like, no. Right? Yeah. I mean, because it's kind of funny. I mean, because your work is like, you've dyed your own fabric, you've made I mean, like, it couldn't be more pure in terms of copyright, in terms of your own work. So then having to deal with other people's work with these extra things, I imagine is a little bit, I mean, you go to such lengths in your own work that it just is kind of ironic that you'd have to deal with other people's intellectual property issues.
And I know from quilt show administration that this is not an unusual issue, that particularly people who make pictorial quilts, that they are often inspired by or substantially base their work on photographs or images made by other visual artists.
Right. That's part of, right, exactly. Now, let me...
Yeah, go on.
I was going to ask you on the flip side of it, how much copyright, like, I imagine you don't register your works in the U.S. How much does it matter to you about copyright on the works that you're creating? Like, if somebody took your works and started, like, when do you start to worry or care? Because you also do workshops to teach people how to do what you do. So I'm curious what your relationship with copyright is on that side of it, of your own creations.
We in Australia don't have a copyright registration system in the same way that you do in the US. So right. The mere fact of creating the work establishes the copyright. And
it's funny because it's true. That's supposed to be true here too, but then we've got all this ridiculousness that if you it rises automatically, but you don't get very much unless you register it. We're the naughty people. Yes.
Enforcement registration becomes important.
Yeah.
So the only way you can prevent people from copying your work is not to share it.
That's right. I agree. I totally agree.
And so I accept that by putting my work out there online and sharing it with people, that people are going to be admiring of it and or wanting to try things out and be inspired by things.
Right.
And so an element of copying may arise sometimes more often than others. So I think you just have to be pragmatic about these things sometimes. But I am keen to. I often will put watermarks on my work, not because I think that's going to stop it from being copied, but because it enables people to trace it back to me, so that they can see more of my work. They can engage me to come and teach workshops. They can engage me to come and give talks. So when I watermark my work, it's a way of connecting me with that work and
Yeah.
enabling people to reach me if they need to.
Very cool. I love it. Very cool.
And,
Okay. Yeah.
But I also encourage artists to be original and to take that step and not to use copying as a crutch. That they really encourage people to explore their own designs and develop their own designs. I think that's actually what makes an art quilter is originality is really important in art. If you are copying something, then it may be expertly constructed and wonderful techniques, but if it's not your own self-expression, then it doesn't reach that art element.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, I've got something real. Okay, I just have two more questions for you. First, when you do your curves, are you piecing them, or are you applicate? Like you said, you didn't applicate, you piece. So you're piecing those curves into your beautiful work?
Absolutely.
Yes, you cut out.
Sorry. Yes. All my work is pieced, so I cut all of those curves.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. They're so beautiful. And then, who out there in your work, like the quilters out there, are there ones that you sort of go, oh, I just like you melt when they see their work? Like, are there ones that you're like, oh my gosh, I love them so much? I'm curious, like, what you look at. Like, the way I look at your work, what do you look at that you're like, wow, like, that's crazy? And what are you drawn to in other people's work? Is it the same kind of stuff that you do? Or is it something that's just totally different, like, when you see other people's work? Because you see a lot of people's work because they send stuff to you because you create these exhibitions. So I'm really curious sort of what makes you go, like, crazy for things, you know?
Oh, I am drawn to abstract works, but I'm also quite admiring of people that work in other media that or use other techniques. So like Betty Busby, she just absolutely wows me with her. She does a lot of scientific-based work and just incredible designs and surface design and stitching. But I also am inspired by non-quilters. I look beyond our quilting world to other forms of work. So Aboriginal art here in Australia, whenever I go into art galleries, that's the section of the gallery that I want to spend a lot of time in and just really admire those abstract patterns and try and understand the connection to their landscape and their world and their whole way of thinking.
Yeah. All right. Last question is, we get a lot of Australian quilters. They dominate. You guys dominate in kind of crazy ways. Why do you think that is? Like, why is there such a strong... There is a strong Australian presence in a way that's kind of remarkable to me. Do you feel that way? Do you feel that way being Australian? Do you feel like that you guys kind of, rock it in a huge way in the quilting world? Or is that a weird question to ask? It's just, I don't know. Maybe I'm just personally drawn to a lot of Australian quilting. I don't know.
Well, I'm the Australian coordinator for the World Quilt Competition, and I'm really excited that this year, 2019, the second and third places in the innovative section were won by Australians. And so, yes, I think Australian quilters do have a high profile on the international stage. I was born in New Zealand, so I sort of come from, and I spend a lot of time in New Zealand as well. And New Zealand a much smaller place, and they've got some wonderful quilters there
Cool.
as well. But both New Zealanders and Australians, we travel, and so we're not afraid to get out there, and so I guess that our work travels too, and it's wonderful to have opportunities of different events to put our work out there. And so
right.
I really encourage people to enter my 2 exhibitions so their work can travel too.
That would be great. I love it. In terms of the international, what countries, like, do you feel like the U.S. feels like quilting is theirs and we're kind of obnoxious about it? I've been doing a lot of quilt history right now, and it's interesting. Like, do you feel like we're like on everything else, we are just completely egocentric about like quilting as a American form? And since you're part of the international quilt movement, international quilt exhibitions, sort of how do we understand where the U.S. fits with all of this versus other places?
Well, we don't. New Zealand and Australia, our roots are strongly in the British Empire, right, and colonization. Yes. So yes. We don't have our own unique history. That's probably not quite true, that there are textile traditions in New Zealand that go back to pre-European settlement. The Maoris made wonderful cloak feathers and so on. But in terms of actual quilting, we're more have our roots in English quilts.
So interesting. Do you see, you may not know the answer to this, and it's so off topic in this crazy way, but do you see the rise of kind of the repeating patchwork stuff happening in New Zealand and Australia in the same way it happens in the U.S., which is the rise of fabric and manufacturing of fabric, and then the rise of the newspapers, and then the 20s and 30s, and then there's kind of an explosion in the U.S. of these repeating, like, we're still stuck in that repeating patchwork thing constantly. And I'm curious if you have that same history of it really mimics the development of technology, right? Like railroads, fabric and newspaper, that the newspapers start to print these patterns. Do you see that as part of the history in Australia and New Zealand too?
There's undoubtedly a strong influence there, and although I said we have our cultural roots in the UK, you cannot dismiss the American geometric patchwork quilting.
And you think that that's an American geometric thing? It's not that it's being developed. It's not. It's weird, right? Because I'm doing this whole chapter on quilt history, and it's just an odd thing. I think it becomes. Here's my theory about it. It's newspaper driven, right? It's small. You can make one little patch. You only have to do one teeny tiny pattern, and it becomes a thing. And then they can sell all this fabric because people need to buy lots of it. It's a very strange thing that we are still doing because of the nature of the industry and how it was developing. I'm curious if that's happening elsewhere, because I think it's really weird that that's what happens. You know? I don't know.
Compelling, but who have taken off and done other things as the diversity and the diversity of Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you. You cut out when you were saying, when I said it was really weird, that I thought that the constraints of newspaper and marketing is sort of pushing us forward on quilting, and then we cut out. Can you hear me?
I can.
You can kind of hear me? You're cutting in and out.
I think that they
Hey, are you there? Huh. All right, so we're having sound trouble. I'm hoping that she gets back. She's so awesome. I mean, really, seriously. This has been so much fun. I'm hoping that we get her back. Hey. Can you hear me?
I'm back again, yes.
All right. So we're almost done. I promise this is the last question. But I'm curious if you think that's weird too, or am I just getting too deep into history? I just think, like, I don't know. Why are we repeating? I mean, your stuff is amazing, but why are we repeating blocks still? You know what I'm saying?
Compelling about shapes, and I use that even in my own abstract work. Repetition, reinforcement is there are lots of people exploring other ways of working.
Yeah.
And diversity is just something to celebrate.
Yes, I totally agree. And I do blocks all the time. So, I mean, I'm just being ridiculous, but it did sort of strike me as that. Well, we're having sound problems, but I think you're so amazing. I just thank you so much. I know I kept bugging you to do this interview, and I'm totally appreciative that you were willing to come on and chat with us. And your work is super cool, and all the things you're doing, and both of your vision things are so cool. And if I get the courage up, I'll try to, send you something.
Well, you've got months that they're not.
I know, it's true.
The little ones, the 8x8-inch ones,
right.
aren't due until the 20th of February.
I know, exactly, right?
So
exactly
you start thinking about it.
Exactly. I got to think about vision, what it means to see, what it means to not see. I think that's good. Yeah, I love it. All right, well, you're amazing, and thank you for being willing to play on a whole host of topics. And you're awesome. I don't know. That's great.
And thank you for the opportunity to share these exhibition opportunities. I appreciate it. Of course.
We will post more information on them on our website, and also we'll let you know. Do you need to review this at all? We will cut out the parts where it just went to weirdness because of the sound problem, but other than that, we'll pretty much post it. Is that okay?
You're good to go.
Fabulous. All right. I think you're great. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you have a nice day. And
enjoy your long weekend.
Yes. After 3 days of teaching, I need a break. No, I'm just kidding. It's ridiculous. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So you've been listening to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. And I'm Elizabeth Townsend Gard. If you like this podcast, keep listening. Also, we have a Facebook group. Come join us. We talk about a lot of things. We also have an Instagram account. And of course, most importantly, I really hope you get a chance to quilt today.